We're talking law on Radio 97, and if you've missed any of the previous programs in the Talking Law series, you can check them out 24 hours a day on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and type in Priala, and you'll find all of Despina's videos there on YouTube anytime you like, Despina.
Absolutely. They're all there, and including these segments, which I'll be posting this weekend. And we have another juicy one.
A very juicy one, which is almost hard to believe. And we've had plenty of conversations off air about this topic.
Some of which will never be heard outside of studio.
Exactly.
Just trying to wrap our head around it. So the ACT is officially the first jurisdiction in Australia to decriminalise illicit drugs. And the fine that goes along with this is only $100. So Despina, can you talk us through, this new law, why has it changed, who's involved, and how does it affect people in the ACT?
Yeah, look, why am I raising it today as well? Look, I think that, and this show's all about empowering people with knowledge and knowing what's happening out there in our country. And I only just discovered this recently myself, and I think that this very much flew under the radar, because I think you'll agree with me, we haven't actually heard much about it. And it might surprise you to know that these laws in the ACT were actually passed a year ago, almost a year ago in October. It was the 20th of October, 22. But these laws that we're going to talk about will only commence, I think it's the 25th of October next month. So they actually were passed about a year ago. Nobody really knew about it. It sort of flew under the radar, and now people are talking about it. There's articles in the Australian and other publications about these new laws that are about to commence in the ACT of all the states and territories. Interesting one, where the decriminalisation of 9 illicit drugs is actually going to occur.
And these are the big drugs, aren't they?
These are the big drugs.
These are hard drugs.
These are hard drugs. I was shocked, as you were, when I discovered that this is about to become law. And look, there's a lot of controversial issues, as you can imagine. The listeners out there will be going, what is this all about, and why has this happened? And very good question. You'd have to speak to those people down in the ACT who come up in their infinite wisdom to pass such a bill for their perhaps personal use or otherwise in the ACT. Supposedly, it is a law or laws for the health and betterment of the community. Now, whether or not that's actually going to fly and whether that's actually going to become a reality remains to be seen. The actual bill or an act, now it's been passed, is called the Drugs of Dependence Personal Use Act. And it actually, what it does is it now provides civil penalties, not criminal, but civil penalties if you are found in possession of these 9 illicit drugs, which we'll list in a minute. So it's no longer going to be seen as a criminal act or criminal charge and or conviction. Obviously, the laws relating to dealing in drugs, if you're a dealer, is still there, and that they haven't been touched. We're talking about if you're walking down the street or wherever you are in the ACT and you are found to be in possession of any of these drugs, and there are limits. So there's small quantities, and that's also, again, a controversial issue, because I think the connotation of, it's only small, therefore we should decriminalise it because it's not a big deal, I think remains to be seen as well.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's we're talking about hard drugs here. So we're not talking about marijuana, the list that you're about to read out. If you think of small quantities of these kinds of drugs, or if you have a mixture of small quantities of these drugs, they're deathly.
Well, that's the point, isn't it, too, that you might say, oh, well, what's the big deal if it's only a gram or 1.5, which we'll read in a minute, of a particular drug. But what if you have different drugs at the same time, but you're under the limit that they've set? And I'm not really clear with these laws about whether that means that you're okay, or do you just get $100 fine for each instance that you are found to have be in possession of these drugs. So yes, they're including the hard ones. So we're talking about cocaine, we're talking about amphetamine, ice, we're talking about ecstasy, we're talking about LSD, we're talking about MDMA, heroin, if you can believe that. So there are grams set as limits, yes, and I think the most is 1.5 grams for certain drugs such as cocaine, ice, amphetamines, ecstasy, MDMA. So there are limits, yes, but they're not that far away from the trafficable limits set in the ACT either. So that was another interesting point that was raised. So there's not much difference between some of the other limits set.
Which is what in the ACT, about 2 grams? So it's about a
lot of them,
difference.
yes, a lot of them are set at 2 grams to be considered a trafficable offence. Yes, which is a criminal act. Yes. So, and when you look at what's the consequence now? So the consequence can be $100 fine, or it could not be a fine at all. It could be, well, you just can go off to a diversion drug course and go and do your course. And I'm not really sure what that course means, whether it's 24 hours, whether it's 7 days, and I don't know whether if you're found to have multiple civil, penalties or offences here, do you continue to do a course? I mean, I don't know how it's going to pan out.
Yeah, so it doesn't specify there is, say, if you get caught with ice 1 week and then you get caught again with some heroin a fortnight later, do you then get a criminal offence to your name?
Yeah, so I think all of this is going to obviously over time pan out to see how it actually works in the real world down there, and whether it's actually going to be a benefit to society, which I question highly, or whether it's really going to end up being easier for the youth and other people to just succumb to drug addiction and drug dependence.
What are they saying is their reasoning for doing this?
Well, what I've read in the short amount of time in the last week is it seems to be some form of a health response, to the community down there, in some form or another, to pass these laws. But remember, the ACT was the first and still remains, I believe, the only territory and jurisdiction or state in Australia that legalised the use of cannabis a few years ago. Mm. So, again, we have the ACT coming out, and, interesting, it's the ACT. What's unique about the ACT? Do you know? I know. There could be some unique, points down there, or unique settings down in the ACT,
and some unique people as well. Just briefly, is this a trial? Firstly, or is it just ongoing? And secondly, could we see laws similar to this in other states and territories around Australia?
Look, we could, but I have not heard any movement yet in any of the other states and territories. And I think when the ACT legalised the use of cannabis, I didn't see it pick up on anywhere else yet. There's been a lot of talk about it. But again, the ACT is out there on its own, doing what they think is best. And whether or not it is remains to be seen, like I said. And as I said before, I'm not aware of any talks or proposed changes to any other states yet. And I think everyone's going to sit and wait and see what the outcome is going to be with these laws that have been passed that will commence, next month. So it will become a reality. I mean, my concerns also are people who are going to take advantage of this, by hopping over the border and going down there for, a weekend stint or whatever. Again, getting used to that dependency perhaps, and the use of these illicit drugs, and then hopping back over the border to New South Wales, Victoria, or wherever they're coming from.
And also, we don't wear a seatbelt and you get slapped with an over $1,500 fine or something. Yet if you do heroin there and get caught, you get a $100 fine. Something doesn't add up.
I don't see the logical justification in that whatsoever, to be honest. And I know that the Law Society and ACT didn't necessarily support all of these laws that they were considering before it was passed. So I think that, we'll have to see how this all pans out over time. And certainly I think that any report that might be issued in the future about how well, these laws have done would also need to be looked at and scrutinised a little bit more as to who's actually issued that report for whose benefit.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Despina. If anyone does want to get in touch with you about the new heroin laws and the ACT or anything else for that matter, where can they go?
They can phone the office 55291 294, email info@prialalegal.com.au. And then, of course, YouTube's out there with all the segments. We'll see you next week.
Yes, indeed. Interesting times we live in. We'll see you next week.
See you then, guys.
Are you confused about legal jargon? Do you need legal advice but don't know where to turn? Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97. Despina, a leading lawyer with over 20 years of experience, will demystify the law and provide practical advice to help you navigate legal issues. Whether it's a family matter, a property dispute, or a business concern, Talking Law has got you covered. Don't miss out on this valuable resource. Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97.